Line East Africa. We now want to switch our focus to that concluded trip by President Uhuru Kenyatta to Uganda. He addressed the National Assembly and there were also some bilateral talks there. I want to get some perspective on this and why this is very important. So we're speaking to Member of Parliament for Tetu constituency here in Kenya, Ndungu Githinji, who is also the chair of the Defense and Foreign Relations Committee in Kenya's National Assembly, joining us now from our studios in the city center of Nairobi. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. Let's talk about why this was so important. President Uhuru Kenyatta could easily have gone to Uganda for the bilateral talks, had a set of agreements and come back. But there was the arrangement for him to speak to the National Assembly in Uganda. Tell us the significance of that.
Yvonne, yes, I think a few years down the line when we get to the state of African integration and East African integration, I think we look back on this point in history as being the singular trigger point that initiated the coalescence of the East African community and ultimately the African Union. This type of leadership that seeks to integrate the region and seeks to integrate markets and communities is really what Africa has been aspiring for since the inauguration of the Organization of African Unity. And President Kenyatta's presence in Uganda in a high-level state visit was just such a trigger point and will certainly be looked at in history as one of the singular moments that brought the coalescence of the East African community in terms of inspiring the community member states and the communities inside the East African community to work towards closer harmonization, towards integration and towards unity.
All right, Ndungu, this is something that without a doubt is at the heart of President Uhuru Kenyatta's policy. Why is he so passionate about integration in the East African community? He's been in office 2 years, this is his third year, but this is something he's definitely seems to be passionate about. Could you tell us where his mind is and why this is so important to him?
Well, Yvonne, I mean, any right-thinking African knows that integration and ultimate unity and regional integration is the only logical solution for the peoples of this region, of this East African community, and ultimately for the peoples of Africa. Because only when we collapse our markets and our communities and make larger market blocks and free trade amongst our peoples. I mean, Africa collectively is close to 1 billion human beings. I mean, that is a sizable market that nobody in the world can ignore. The East African community is a region of over 200 million people market, which again is a market that nobody in the world can ignore. It only makes sense. We cannot continue to defend borders that were created for us by Europeans a long time ago in Europe, which ultimately in the global economic paradigm really have no viability. And ultimately what we're seeking to do is nothing new. We've been doing this, Africa had been integrated before. We were segregated in 1885 by the Europeans at the Berlin Conference. All we're seeking to do is go back to the future. We've been integrated for 5,000 years before the 1885 partition of Africa. So it is nothing new, it only makes sense, it is logical, it is imperative, and it is for the mutual benefit of all of us. And President Kenyatta said severally, all we are seeking to do is for the prosperity of the people and the member states and the communities inside the EAC region.
All right, let's talk about the EAC specifically for a moment. We've been down this road before, Ndungu, didn't quite work. How are we going to succeed now where it didn't happen before? We're talking about different countries with different political systems, different political cultures, even our economies aren't at the same level. What's it going to take to see full integration now when this failed before?
What will be the difference is really the political will, because ultimately with the political will, the correct political will, which we have today, anything is possible. And as for the question of, can it work because we're different peoples? Are we? Are we really different? How different are we? President Kenyatta made a very good point when I think it was Samuel Kiprotich won the marathon a few months ago, and Kenyans were all over the streets celebrating, only to find out that actually he's actually from Uganda. Wilson Boyd when we were in the 60s. I mean, we are really the same people divided by colonial boundaries which are imposed on us by our European colonizers. So we're not really that different. Actually, in fact, if we analyze the similarities of African cultures, African systems of governance, we have more in common with each other than we do with people in Europe and the West. Yet they are able to easily integrate themselves. The United States has been an integral state for 400 years. The United Kingdom has been a unitary state. European Union is coalescing. Why is it so impossible to imagine that Africans can? And in fact, the unity of Africa is not even a destination, and it's not a requirement. It is an unstoppable reality that is going to happen within the next few years.
Okay, Ndungu, that being said about our similarities, and I guess that's important to point out, but there are a few challenges towards getting all of us together on the same platform, the political one. But let's also talk about the business one for a moment, because in as much as there's political will, we do have some non-tariff barriers, the ban of some goods, denial of market entry. There's also a delay in clearance of goods. Immigration regulations tend to be still a challenge in the region. And some say that, listen, the policy is being made at the top level where there is the political will that you talk about, but then just getting those things implemented, at the lower level, immigration regulations, for example, with Kenyans still having to be double taxed in Uganda, for instance. So talk to us about some of those challenges and the work that needs to be done to overcome them.
Indeed, bureaucracies, while being a necessary evil of administration and the civil service, are sometimes the impediments to the political progress that we want to make as leaders, or that presidents want to make as leaders. And this is what President Kenyatta also alluded to and lamented about, is that the political will seems to be outpacing the bureaucratic reform within, the institutions that deliver services between the communities or between the partner states. This can be rapidly broken down once the civil services of our respective countries and the bureaucracies understand the commitment by our leadership to the path that we are now taking. And also other levels of leaders, whether they be in the media, they be in parliament, they be in civil society, also must play their role in participating to break down those bureaucracies and report on them and out them where they are stifling the progress in integration. So there may be, and there have been, and it would be dishonest for me to say that there may not be forces which are stuck in the past and want to bog us down in prehistoric thinking and not take us forward where we need to be in the future. So we all have a role to play in breaking down the bureaucracies that are bent on either slowing down or frustrating or outright sabotaging what the political will and the leadership of the countries want to achieve in an East African integration and ultimately an African integration.
All right, Ndungu, before I let you go, just one last question. Obviously, some news emerging out of President Uhuru's trip to Uganda and some of those agreements that were made. A section of MPs from Western Kenya are taking issue with the fact that the Kenyan market is now opening up to sugar from Uganda, saying that that is going to put local industries at risk. The Mumias Sugar Company there is obviously under some great financial strain, but they're reacting negatively to this, saying this will not be good. Could you speak to that issue specifically tonight?
I think maybe there may be some misunderstanding or lack of information surrounding the issue of Ugandan sugar. The Ugandan sugar element is part of the COMESA free trade agreement that we have within the region. Uganda is a member of COMESA. There is a quota of sugar that is allowable into Kenya from COMESA member states. Previously, it used to come from Sudan. There is a deficit of the sugar that is entering the country, and that deficit can be allowed to be taken up by any of the COMESA member state signatory countries. So I think maybe the fear may be a little unfounded. Of course, the president is very well committed, as you've seen, to supporting sugarcane farmers in the country, the bailout of Mumias Sugar Factory, and the commitment that, as an administration, we are focused on helping the sugar belt, the sugar growing region, to overcome the challenges that they are suffering. So I think the fear may be a bit unfounded. There'll be everything done possible to make sure that everybody's accommodated. And we must also not limit it to sugar. We also must expand that debate to the issues of coffee, which are affecting central Kenya, which you know, has been the mainstay of the economy of central Kenya, and have since collapsed. And we want those efforts to be also you know, put forward in the coffee industry and in other areas of our agricultural traditional cash crop producing areas, so that we may all feel the benefit of the integration and all feel the benefit of the expanding markets that we're creating through the EAC.
All right, Ndungu Githinji is the chair of the Defense and Foreign Relations Committee in Kenya's Parliament. We thank you for your time this evening on KTN Bottom Line East Africa. We will be speaking to him, obviously, a lot more as we continue to keep our eye on integration within the East African region. I want us to have a little bit of political analysis now on that speech that was made by President Uhuru to the National Assembly in Uganda. We're now joined on Skype by Godpa Tumushabe, who's a political analyst. We had him with us here on KTN News. And with me here in Nairobi is Martin Olo, who's a political analyst. Gentlemen, thank you both for your time. Let's start here in Kenya first. Martin, your thoughts on that speech that he made there. There was obviously high expectation, and we'll just get straight into the political aspect of it. He touched on a number of issues, economy, right, the youth, but he also talked a little bit about democracy. Now, everybody was saying Kenya is the big brother in the region in terms of that. Did he address the issue adequately?
I think the president was fairly careful. I mean, he said two things which were important. One, that if the people of Uganda or any other country want to have it one way, for instance, they don't want term limits, that is their democratic right. But he also quickly said that if they choose to have term limits the way in Kenya they have chosen to have term limits, then it's their will, and therefore their constitutional expression should be upheld. So he was very careful to balance both sides. Bottom line is that in his view, if people in Uganda, people in Rwanda want it one way, and people in Kenya want it the other way, there's nothing wrong with that.
So let the people decide. So you think he was a little careful?
I think he was careful. He was careful. He was visiting, and he didn't want to appear to be
He didn't want to ruffle feathers.
Yes,
okay.
Yes,
we also have Godpa Tumushabe, who's joining us from Kampala, Uganda. Godpa, thanks for joining us again on KTN News. Let's talk about your expectations of that. Did it meet that? Everyone was expecting him to do the Obama thing and sort of provide a lecture to Uganda. Did that meet everybody's expectations?
No, I think that generally President Uhuru's speech here got acclamation. I think everybody that I've talked to, listened to, really have talked about it with approval. And mainly for three probably key reasons. One is that he mixed the speech with quite a bit of humor, which was quite really interesting, and the joke about Kiprotich was a very interesting one. Yeah. Secondly, he really provided a big picture narrative of where society should be moving in terms of infrastructure, in terms of focus on youth and innovation, in terms of a broader picture element. But I think thirdly, which is for me was significant, is that he had the courage to talk about democratization or democracy in general. For me, you remember when we talked before he visited, that was really my key question. Will Uhuru gather the courage to talk about democracy? Because in Uganda, really, our biggest problem is not about building roads and bridges and railways. It's about the ability of people to express their free will, to have freedom, because freedom is the
bottom line. East Africa, we now want to switch our focus to that concluded trip by President Uhuru Kenyatta